in a very duplicatable way. That's not randomness at all.
What is randomness? That's the thing. There is no randomness.
Right.
Randomness is when a human being can no longer compute all the factors. And we use an expression called randomness, meaning, okay, I rolled this dice, it landed on 7 randomly. Why? Because I couldn't compute all the variables. So,
okay, I see what you're
so
saying.
randomness is kind of it's an illusion that we project onto the world. So Laplace, one of the greatest physicists in history, okay, Simon Laplace, he says, look at a billiard ball table. Okay, if you tell me which way you're going to break the billiard balls, if you tell me what velocity and what angle you're going to hit the cue ball, I could tell you where every single ball is going to be on the pool table. That's what Laplace says. Okay, he's a phenomenal thinker. And he says, why? Because I'm going to take that table, I'm going to turn it to a math. I'm going to take the weight of the ball, the friction of the table, the density of the bands, the gravity of the earth, excuse me. I'm going to take all those variables. I'm going to put them up on this board here. All I need to know is how hard you're going to hit the ball. And I'll tell you precisely where every ball is going to land. Now, somebody who doesn't know mathematics or geometry is going to look at that table. When he sees the break, to him it's going to seem random. But randomness is really a reflection of his ignorance. He's not able to compute all this information. That's why Laplace says, to God, the world is not random. To somebody who has information, the world is not random. That's why he says, it's very important, that's why we're so determinist, because we believe that what's happening right now is a byproduct of the past. The past caused this happening right now. The past was out of your control. If I reset the universe and let it play all over again, identical circumstance, you would drink that exact same amount of coffee you had today. You would have made the same, you would have married the same woman, you would have had the same kids, you would have had the same t-shirt on right now, you would have the mic at the same distance, everything would be reset. So when we look at the world through the eyes of physics, they say the causal line is complete. The causal line is complete, meaning where is this space for randomness or free will? We don't factor it in. The only time we do factor it in is when we look at ourselves inwardly. But when we look at the world objectively as a third person, so there's two views. There's the internal view, first-person experience. We don't believe in determinism. We have free will. That's first-person experience. Third-person experience, I'm studying Joe. All I see in Joe is billiard balls. So when you have a thought, it's all billiard balls hitting one another. And if I had an infinitely precise calculator, according to Laplace, I could tell you where you're going to be 5 years from now, what you're going to be doing. Why? Because I'm seeing one billiard ball hit another. It's just take that pool table experiment and make it the greatest pool game in history. There are countless atoms. There are countless billiard balls striking into one another. Somebody can calculate the world of physics and tell you where your hand's going to be. Laplace says, I'm going to tell you where your hand's going to be in 5 years from now. But you don't know my personal choices I'm going to make. That's irrelevant. He'll tell you that's irrelevant. Why? Because he sees the billiard balls moving inside your mind, so to speak. Now, Leibniz reconciled the two. Because, see, for instance, when I'm living in the first person, this is my intuition. I'm like, hey, I grabbed that cup of coffee. I had this internal experience that's outside of physics. So Leibniz gives a great example. He says, look, if I was really, really tiny and I'd walk around your mind, I would see blood flow, I would see neurons firing, I would see all sorts of biological interactions. But I wouldn't see anything of consciousness. I wouldn't see your thoughts. I wouldn't see you thinking about your wife, hearing your child's voice, thinking about what you want to have for dinner. I wouldn't see any of that. I would just see billiard balls hitting one another. However, now that I'm having this first-person experience, there's something we call intuition, this first-person experience itself. You're having this spiritual type of transcendent experience. What it's like to have a thought, what it's like to be me. So for instance, I see that cup of coffee, I desire the cup of coffee and I drink it. Science has no information about my conscious experience, my intuitive experience. Science is not absolute. It cannot tell me everything about the universe. It can only tell me about the billiard balls. It can only go so far. At that point, it has to stop. Because it doesn't have, our senses cannot sense the conscious experience that we're having. The conscious experience is only known intuitively. So first person experience. So Leibniz says this, he says, look, you look at the world, when we study the world, we're all seeing billiard balls hitting one another. Nobody argues about that. However, our intuition is telling us that's all untrue. We have the ability to move our own hand, desire something, grab something, eat something, consume something, make a choice. And he says, how could they coexist? Because remember, in reason, For me to accept something as logically true, I have to eliminate every other possibility. So he found one possibility that till today it's never been refuted. He says he calls it the twin trains. So picture two trains, okay? They're going up and down, side by side, traveling at the same speed. They look like they're connected to one another, but they're not. They're just synchronized. Every time one goes left, the other one goes left. One goes up, one goes down. And so when Leibniz tells you, he says, look, when you reach for that cup of coffee, the universe had already decided millions of billions of years ago that that was going to happen. Your intuitive sense just coincides with it perfectly. And he said that's what he calls the twin trains theory, the correlation theory. That your desire to grab that cup of coffee doesn't affect your hand, does not move your hand. That would be impossible. That would be something non-physical moving something physical. So he says that they're just correlated perfectly. When you ask him, how do they correlate so perfectly? He says, well, God. It's like God took the greatest pull shot in history.